Katherine Stewart is the author of the New York Times bestseller. One of our own made the New York Times bestseller, Money, Lies, and God. She also has written God and Country, The Power Worshippers, which was the basis for the Rob and Michelle Reiner documentary called God and Country. The most important thing about her work is she protects us all in this way. If you are a religious right-wing oppressor, she will ferret you out. You can run, but you can't hide from Katherine Stewart.
Thank you so much for being here, all of you, and thanks to Eddie, Jim, and everybody else at CFI. And listen, I'm aware that this may be a politically diverse audience, and if it is, if you think the current administration is fantastic, thank you for being here, and thank you for your willingness to listen. I appreciate that. And for the rest of you, I have to warn you in advance, we're going to talk about stuff that's pretty uncomfortable. It's going to get dark because we're going to talk about what's happening in our country today. But I promise you that at the end, we are not facing hopelessness. I'm going to sort of talk in the end about things that we can do as individuals, things we can do when we join together with others. And there's no feature of the political system as of yet that means the current coalition can govern forever. I continue to believe that the tools of democracy can be used not only to restore democracy, but also to work toward forming a more perfect union. There are no guarantees, of course, but if there is will to be done and people make strategic moves and are persistent and join together with others, then it can be done. Amidst the chaos, I'm actually seeing some broader awakening among some sections of the population. I'm starting to see more coalition building. I'm starting to see a lot of folks who sort of voted for the candidate who promised to end abortion or defend women's sports or whatever the issue was, that the sort of culture war issue that they voted on, recognize that, oh, this isn't really about protecting women's spaces. This is about destroying the economy and ruining the IRS. This is about destroying Medicare and Social Security and health research. This is about the price of goods rising because of needless tariffs. I do think that there is an opportunity now to say to those people who are starting to sort of question their previous choices, here are the people who did this to you. And here are the people who are fighting for you. So let's talk about the reasons for their widespread alarm and ours. An evisceration of the Department of Justice, including attacks on the independence of the Department of Justice. Executive orders instructing the Department of Justice to target Trump's political opponents and governments by name. Or for having one of whom just had the temerity to say that the 2020 election was not, in fact, stolen, to speak the truth. We're seeing a haphazard and grotesquely inefficient chainsaw attack on vital government services. We're seeing an attack on US national security with willful undermining of our most important alliances and support for some of our worst adversaries. Does this make America great? I don't think so. Spectacularly reckless communications in the Department of Defense, really putting our country at risk in so many levels. Attacks on individual rights, including the disappearance of individuals into offshore gulags for suspected speech crimes or even for no crime at all. An assault on the world economy that's going to impoverish Americans as well as many other people, an utter abandonment of American soft power. You know, power hates a vacuum. When America steps away, guess who else steps in to take that soft power? To say nothing of the suffering that the abandonment of food aid and disease management is creating in other parts of the world. We're seeing the targeting of law firms that have represented democratic causes. And now the latest. The State Department has been instructed to tell its employees to rat out their colleagues for displaying, quote, anti-Christian bias, whatever that means. All of this is in line with the broader Christian nationalist agenda: demolish the institutions of government and push through unconstitutional measures to make room for growing influence of religious institutions, conservative religious institutions, mind you. They don't see all Christians as properly the right kind of religion. And of course, eliminate types of civil service that do not conform to a theocratic agenda. Movement leaders for many years have said government shouldn't be doing it, it should be the churches doing it. So they want the taxpayer, that's you and me, to directly fund conservative churches so that they can supposedly offer the services that government has really been taking care of. How do we make sense of this? These features follow from the nature of the anti-democratic political movement that has been building in this country over the past several decades. The movement long preceded Donald Trump, but it came to peak power with the 2024 election, and Trump has really given the anti-democratic movement rocket fuel. The first thing to notice about the governing practice of the present administration is that it depends in a very fundamental way on a constant war on the truth. One of the first casualties of this war on the truth is competence in government, just basic competence. You can see it in the whole Doge fiasco. What kind of government fires the people who handle nuclear weapons and approve new medications and exposes information on semi-functional websites and ensures food safety? What kind of government takes a sledgehammer to air traffic control, eliminates consumer protection agencies that have delivered billions of dollars, returned billions of dollars to consumers who were defrauded? How do we get so much incompetence in one place at one time? Attacks on universities and research, really taking a sledgehammer, a chainsaw, to what has made us great. The present government doesn't just tell you that up is down. It tells you this when the truth of the situation is staring at you and every other sentient creature in the face. And then, incredibly, it bases policy on the idea that up is down. So, for example, the administration came to power in part by persuading a sector of the rank and file that the biggest problem facing America, the biggest problem, not poverty, not, hunger, not, our foreign enemies, not trade policy, et cetera, is wokeness and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which they use that. They're using that to launch attacks on free speech, higher education, science research, and civil rights legislation across the board. They manufacture propaganda, such as the idea that public schools are Marxist indoctrination factories that exist to change children's gender against their will, and they do this to justify the dismantling of public education. I mean, could public schools use improvement? Of course, private schools can too. And let's not even talk about the homeschooling sector. But they are, throwing the baby out with the proverbial bathwater. Rather than seeking to improve public education, they're actually trying to destroy it. They repeat the lie that Democrats want to abort babies until the moment they are born, or even after they're born, which doesn't happen. And they use this lie to restrict access to medication that prevents pregnancy in its earliest days and weeks, or even ends it in its earliest stages. So they'll always say they want to abort babies after they're born, but they're trying to ban certain forms of birth control. So that's one, oh, by the way, speaking of trying to ban birth control, now Republicans in Texas have introduced a bill testing for hormones in wastewater, and this is a way they're going to try to go after birth control pills. Are they worried about PFAS? What are they, the sort of plastics in wastewater? Are they worried about oil in wastewater? Are they worried about all the number of other contaminants that are much, much more prevalent in wastewater and have been proven to be very dangerous. But are they worried about fracking fluids in wastewater? Absolutely not. It's only the hormones that in many instances keep us healthy. So this is one clear line of alarm. The other is that this administration is laying the groundwork for absolutely epic levels of corruption and cronyism. Elon Musk, who is the legitimate subject of many investigations for his various business arrangements, has secured favored deals for himself while gutting the agencies that are actually investigating him. But of course, Trump and his family have cashed in with these meme coins and through other means with lightning speed. All of this grift, this cronyism, this, frankly, theft of the public treasury is easier to pursue now that the system of justice has essentially been decapitated. And of course, the president has been granted by the Supreme Court immunity for anything that he pretends is official. And thanks to something that I'm calling anti-woke derangement syndrome, there is a list of hundreds, literally hundreds of words that have been banned in the federal government, including such supposedly wokety-woke terms as status, belong, you can't say belong, socioeconomic, historically, can't say historically, expression, disparity, mental health, and accessible. This is all, these words and so many others have been banned in NIH grants and through other means. All of this coming from the people who lectured us about freedom of speech and cancel culture for decades. It's really kind of appalling. Then, of course, there's brazen attack on science and our knowledge base. Have you guys noticed that the budget cutters aren't taking aim at the fossil fuel subsidies and tax breaks for finance people? Instead, they're slashing funding for health research, $800 million from Johns Hopkins alone, defunding the NIH, threatening to revoke the tax-exempt status for universities, which actually produce health research and biotech research and medication research that has made us the envy of the world. They're slashing for funding for organizations that predict potentially life-threatening weather events and prevent pandemics like Ebola. A Secretary of Health and Human Services who somehow thinks we should all get the measles, and if we take vitamin C, we're going to be okay. So what's behind all of this? Well, we have to remember that Donald Trump rose to power with the determined assistance of a movement that denies science, bashes government, and prioritizes loyalty over professional expertise. Leaders of the Christian right have long seen scientific truths grounded in rational inquiry as their enemy, at least since the 19th century, when the pro-slavery theologian and leader of the Southern Presbyterian Church, Robert Louis Dabney, attacked the physical sciences, as he called them, theories of unbelief. He actually used that term, theories of unbelief. Hostility to science has characterized the more extreme versions of religious nationalism in the United States. Today, climate denialism is mainstream in the MAGA movement. Among the federal government's list of banned phrases and words are clean energy, pollution, can't say pollution, climate science, and environmental quality. Some leaders of the Christian nationalist movement, like those allied with an organization called the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation, which has denounced environmental science as a cult of the green dragon, they cast environmentalism as an alternative and false theology. Religious nationalism has brought to American politics the conviction that our political differences are a battle between absolute good and absolute evil. You know, a lot of the ways that I do my research is I go to right-wing conferences and strategy gatherings and pastor network gatherings, because I have always thought you can't really know what's happening in this movement unless you're in the room when these folks are talking to one another. And the politics is often seen as in the here and now as a sort of expression of spiritual battles being carried out in the heavens. And anyone not on board with their agenda, including moderate Republicans, you know, the rhinos as they call them, and of course, any kind of democratic institutions are referred to as demonic organizations or satanic. And they see themselves as engaged in a struggle between the so-called party of life and the implications that anyone not on board with them is a member of the party of death. So they don't really have to worry, in a way, about crafting careful policy based on expert opinion and analysis. In fact, they often derived expertise. They think that only a heroic leader, freed from the boundaries of political correctness and the rule of law, frankly, can save the righteous from the damned. Fealty to the cause is everything. Fidelity to the facts and the truth is nothing. But again, so what's the deeper reason for this? Well, democracy relies on specialized knowledge. It relies on expertise. It relies on rational accountability in order to function. Trump's people understand intuitively that this kind of rationality is inimical to dictatorial power. So they've set about destroying centers of expertise and have continued to lie and spread disinformation as vigorously as possible. Quite simply, they understand that the truth is their enemy. But here's the thing. They were not hiding their agenda. They're doing exactly what they said they would do. The leaders of the new right, which I describe it in detail in my book, Money, Lies, and God, and which is one part of the anti-democratic coalition, they said for years that they wanted to smash the administrative state. Those are the words that they use. The administrative state is the institutions of a functioning democracy. Some of them said that they longed for a more monarchical form of government. A red Caesar is what some of them call it. The religious right, on the other hand, which is another key part of the anti-democratic coalition, told us that they hated public schools. In 1979, Jerry Falwell made the agenda very clear. He said, "I hope to see the day when there are no more public schools, churches will have taken them over and Christians will be running them." Why do they hate public schools? Well, public schools are pluralistic. They teach children how to get along with others, including those from different backgrounds. And, even though the right says that they're Marxist indoctrination factories, I sent my kids through public schools, for part of one of our kids' education and part of another kid's education. And they teach kids facts. They teach kids science and history, and they teach kids how to read and do math. They're really focused on the basics. And they teach kids how to think critically, which of course is inimical, to dictatorial power. Religious right leaders also endorse biblical economics. Have you guys ever heard of that term?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, read my books, because they say it's this idea about a supposedly biblically correct economy in which the workforce is disempowered and power and money accrues to the very top. Leaders of both sides of the anti-democratic coalition have nothing but contempt for the values of pluralism and equality and justice and rule of law that represent the best of the American promise. I have been documenting the rise of the anti-democratic coalition and the Christian nationalist movement for over 16 years through 3 books. Money, Lies, and God is my 3rd book on the topic. Some of you know my origin story about how I really got interested in this field when an after-school fundamentalist indoctrination program came to my daughter's public elementary school here in California, actually. So I won't repeat that story here. But the important thing that I've observed over time, it's like I fell down the rabbit hole and then started to see the connections and the legal strategy, the organizational infrastructure of this movement. And what I've seen is that the movement has really evolved just very rapidly in the past 16 years. The core ideology hasn't really changed, but its influence and appeal has broadened to a massive degree. And now it sort of hold over one of America's 2 major political parties is indisputable. It's really sidelined, I would say, true conservatives who believe in conserving the institutions of value that have served us over time. 16 years ago, it was clear enough that the leaders behind the fundamentalist indoctrination program targeting my daughter's school were exploiting religion to pursue a political agenda that was profoundly at odds with American democracy. But this organization, I realized, was just one small component of a leadership-driven, organization-driven political machine, right? It's a machine that has a very sort of highly developed and incredibly well-funded legal ecosphere. And that legal ecosphere is one of the movement's most vital features. What they'll do is, over time, bring the right cases to the right courts, creating these novel legal building blocks to end up securing a very big win that is intended to sideline or undermine the establishment clause of our First Amendment, which, by the way, has the best piece of real estate in our Constitution. You know, Congress shall make no law regarding an establishment of religion which has been interpreted to ensure the separation of church and state as it was intended by our founders. This has been one of America's most sort of fantastic creations. It's been one of the things that has ensured true religious freedom, which is the freedom to worship any god or sacred idea or none, to worship as you choose. It also includes the freedom from having to worship if you don't want to, or freedom from being compelled to support any religion with your money if you don't want to. It's, of course, never been perfectly applied, but it's always been an ideal to work toward. But this is a movement that has been very determined to redefine the meaning of religious liberty in a way that turns civil rights law on its head. In recent years, the movement has also broadened its base of donors, substantially increased its power, and made inroads among new populations. It's more overt in calling for an end to pluralistic democracy. Movement leaders used to feel like they had to hide their belief that Christians of a certain type, we're not talking all Christians here, of course, just sort of reactionary, those of a reactionary variety. It's like hard to express the degree to which the politics leads the religion here, not the other way around. And they used to feel like they had to hide this view that those folks, the sort of righteous, should dominate all features of government and society. And now they're really overt about it. I just would love to see a show of hands. How many of you guys have heard of the Seven Mountains Mandate? Okay, great. I'll tell you what it is. It's the idea that only certain types of Christians should dominate the seven moulders or mountains of culture, which include things like finance, education, media, religion, education. It's like the seven sort of key features of government and society. And there's this sort of sector of the religious right that is sort of bringing new energy to the movement. It's the sort of independent, charismatic networks, including but not limited to the New Apostolic Reformation. Sort of, these are both transnational and also multiracial movements, and it's sort of bringing new members into that base of voters. And among that sector, the Seven Mountains Mandate is pretty widely shared. But the thing about the Seven Mountains is the language and style of this type of religion is actually spilling over into other sectors of the movement that are not themselves parts of, remotely charismatic or Pentecostal. Like the sort of independent charismatic networks will advocate speaking in tongues and things like that. But that sort of Seven Mountains framing is starting to become, frankly, mainstream within the movement, even amongst folks who do not remotely are not really on board with the charismatic movement themselves. At a lot of the religious right conferences I attend, speakers sneer, by the way, at Christians who emphasize Christian teachings of social justice. They're dismissed as woke heretics, false prophets, even agents of Satan. I was recently at America Fest. It's sponsored by Turning Point USA. It's one of the big movement gatherings. It's led by Charlie Kirk. So there were 20,000 hardcore MAGA supporters at the Phoenix Convention Center. And the leader of their faith outreach program wrote a book titled Woke Jesus, and then the subtitle, I have to paraphrase it, something like the heresy destroying the Christian church, or something like that. And he said, I've made it my mission to eradicate wokeism from the American church, or woke Christianity from the American church. What counts as woke Christianity? He named the social gospel. He named liberation theology and the historical Jesus movement. So let's be clear, like the religious right is representing, there's like an approved form of religion, even an approved form of a favored religion, and then they see everyone else who is Christian and isn't on board with their agenda as their leaders as false prophets, and haven't fallen victim or being promoting this sort of demonic ideology, or just and some express it as New Age religion. The title of my book, Money, Lies, and God, explains how we got here. I want to break it down briefly, and then I want to stop talking and hear from you guys. So first, money is a huge part of the story, meaning that huge concentrations of wealth at the very tippy top of the economic ladder have destabilized the political system in some really interesting ways. And look, America has a lot of very wealthy people, and it's only a sector of the very wealthy who are investing their money in the anti-democratic movement. But I want to talk a little bit about those folks. I call them the funders in the book. They're largely motivated by a desire to advance their economic interests and protect their privileges. They're typically informed by some kind of libertarian ideology. They say they just want the markets to do their thing. They're pro-capitalist people. But at the same time, look at Elon Musk. He's after tax subsidies and privileged contracts for monopolistic businesses and the like. So, they're really just it's really about self-interest. Some of the funders are also driven by, I would say, more overt or cultural goals, but some are absolutely not. And then there's a sector of the leadership I call the power players. They're heading up the various sort of organizations of the sort of infrastructure of the Christian nationalist movement, and some of them are actually making very serious money by promoting these kinds of authoritarian ideas. The funders are also investing their wealth in a whole set of media empires and initiatives whose business model is to spread lies and disinformation. So this is where the lies fits into my book. Do you guys know about Reawaken America? I'd love to see another show of hands. Oh my gosh. You've got to read my book. I have a whole chapter on Reawaken America. It's a pro-MAGA conspiracy fest. They establish themselves in mega churches around the country. It's organized by Mike Flynn and some of Trump's other most sort of, say, close allies. Usually one of the Trump kids shows up to speak, so you can't claim that it's not connected to the Trump empire at all. So you've got thousands of people descending on these mega churches, and you've got all these sort of YouTubers and Telegram people there. So whatever happens there spins out in this sort of disinformation ecosphere. And you walk in there and they're promoting every single conspiracy you can imagine. The Great Replacement, they're trying to microchip you. The woke elite or whatever, are trying to control every dime of your money. They've got 666 emblazoned on the doors, the World Health Organization, and all of this. I mean, all of these lies coming at you fast and furious. It's intended to separate people from the truth. It's disorienting. A lot of religious nationalism, a lot of, I would say, neo-charismatic movement influence. In some of these places, they have a whole separate pastor gathering, sometimes in a separate day. They'll, like this guy, I think Jason Lawmayer he's the head of an organization called Pastors for Trump. He's spoken about some of these pastor gatherings. They'll get, sometimes hundreds of pastors to attend these things. And it's a way, if you separate people from the truth and separate them from the facts, it makes them easier to control. And if you get people to believe a lot of little lies, they'll believe a big lie, like the idea that Trump is really fantastic and all of the investigations against him were politically motivated and he never did anything wrong, et cetera. So he's got God's hand on his side, et cetera. So that's the money of the lies. And Christian nationalism, you know, I would say is the most important piece of the anti-democratic reaction in a way, because its central role in motivating the rank and file to vote for anti-democratic candidates. It's a key way that they legitimate their support for the anti-democratic movement. And let's be clear, a lot of them aren't really aware of what they're doing. They've been trained to vote as single-issue voters or on 2 or 3 issues. Movement leaders know that if you can get people to vote on a single issue or 2 or 3 issues, you can control their vote. So they, you know, all these disinformation operations, you know, emphasize this sort of, they're aborting babies after they're born, and Democrats are, you know, trans women are taking over women's sports. And by the way, whatever you or I may think about that issue, it's not a kitchen table issue that matters to most Americans. It has, you know, we're dealing with a lot of issues in our country, but if you can get people to vote on like a shiny, do you guys know what a laser pointer cat toy is? Where you got this little red dot going over there. It's like a laser pointer cat toy, and it has to do with sexuality and gender, so everybody looks, right? People can't help themselves. It activates, I don't know, what they call the lizard brain or something. You know, so everybody looks at that, and they're not seeing all this other stuff. They're not seeing how they're making us poorer, making us less secure, not, you know, making us less healthy, not tackling the real issues facing most American families. This is a movement that ironically claims to stand for the American family, and yet they're driving support for politicians whose policies are making it harder for American families to succeed. For years, I'm going to sort of wrap up here, and then I want to hear from you guys. For years, movement leaders have articulated a vision of America that is deeply un-American. It includes the idea that the U.S. is founded not on any principles, but on a specific religion and cultural heritage. It's the idea that America is on the brink of an apocalypse, owing to the rise of equality. Equality is so terrible for them. And what they call wokeness, which seems to be a bucket they throw everything they don't like into, and the radical left, which they see as anyone who is remotely not on board with their agenda. It's the idea that democracy won't be able to solve our problems. And it's the idea that the rules simply don't apply anymore. And what we need is a strong man, an authoritarian leader who puts himself above the law and who is going to seize the reins of power and scrap the rule of law in favor of the iron fist. So in sum, it's the idea that democracy, in the sense of a government as representative of the people, respecting individual rights in a pluralistic society, it's a sense that this kind of government simply doesn't work, so you need to smash it up and create an autocracy and usher in an era of dictatorship. That's the contours of the idea. And as I make clear in Money, Lies, and God, it's emphatically not the idea of Thomas Jefferson or Madison or Frederick Douglass or Abraham Lincoln and so many others who helped create America as we know it. This idea is as anti-American as it gets. So I want to sort of say, you know, America was the first major state founded on an idea, not a tradition, not a specific heritage or a religion. It's the idea that all people are created equal, that we should be governed by laws that are deliberated in public and apply equally to all. It's the idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. These ideals have not been applied consistently over time, but of course we've also always had progressive movements that aimed to sort of create a more perfect union. I want to sort of wrap up here because it's really time to hear from you guys, and I want to thank you so much for being here today and for listening to me.
Okay, we could have some questions. Did you want to talk for just a second about what we can do?
Yeah.
The sliver of hope that's out there?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to. Thank you. Well, there's so much we can do as individuals and so much we can do when we join together with others. I have a whole section at the end of Money, Lies, and God where I talk about the way forward, what we can do. But I just want to start, I don't have time to sort of get into all of those things, but I'll just mention a few things. First, get off the couch. This is no time to crawl under the cupboards and, stream Netflix. If you need to do that a little bit, that's fine. But really, it's time for moral courage. We need to, get out there and get active in order to save our democracy. I think it's really important to note that we need a big tent. We're a really big, diverse country. We're not going to agree on everything. We're not all going to get everything we want. And frankly, we probably shouldn't. It's like a big family with 10 kids. Does every kid get what they want? No. But if we can agree on more than we disagree on, then we can work together. I'm going to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, if I may here, who said, the person who agrees with you 80% of the time is your 80% friend and not your 20% enemy. So we need a really big tent, a really broad coalition, including Republicans who feel like they don't have a party anymore, don't see their values reflected. We need moderates. We need folks who are liberal. We need, that sort of progressive, that big coalition. I think we have to understand also that we are in the majority. More Americans would prefer to live in a democracy than want to live in a cronyistic kleptocracy with a sort of authoritarian governance, absolute suppression of free speech and political opposition. And we look at how these sort of autocracies work around the world and throughout history. When leaders like Putin in Russia or Orban in Hungary, or look at Mussolini in Italy, look at Salazar in Portugal, can look at leaders in Iran, right? Erdogan in Turkey. When these leaders bind, it's not remotely unique to the Christian faith either. It's like religious nationalism is a kind of feature of autocratic societies around the world. When these leaders bind themselves very tightly to ultra-conservative religious leaders in their own countries to consolidate a more authoritarian form of political power, we rightly recognize that as religious nationalism. They're bubble wrapping themselves in sanctimony, so you can't investigate their crimes. They are enriching themselves and their cronies at the public expense, and they're suppressing free speech, political opposition. So I think we need to understand that the more Americans would like to live in a democracy than a system like that. And I think that leads to the whole point that knowledge is power. I mean, one step in responding to the situation we're facing is to educate people. They need to grasp first that the nature of the anti-democratic system, and they need to understand that it actually creates a permission structure for political violence, a sort of demonization of political other can lead to political violence, and it's incredibly dangerous. I've written my 3 books the first was called The Good News Club, Power Worshippers, and now Money, Lies, and God, to show how this movement built its power. It's not a mystery. They invested for decades in the infrastructure of their movement. And there are things this movement does that we would never want to do. We wouldn't want to spread lies. We wouldn't want to inspire or carry out political violence or organize political violence. But we have to take note of the things that they have done, which is turn out their base of voters very effectively and go after low propensity voters. There is no substitute for the power of the vote. I mean, Ralph Reed, who's one of the movement's most seasoned and astute strategists, said, at one of the gatherings I attended, he said, pay no attention to the polls. Our numbers are shrinking. All that matters is who turns out on election day. And he's absolutely right. So it's really important to, whatever else you're doing, not just vote, but hold people in your inner circle accountable to vote. Volunteer to babysit a young mom so she can, get to the polls. Or if you have a friend who doesn't drive or has a disability or maybe gets tired, in the middle of the day, volunteer to drive them to the polls so that they can vote. don't think that just because you live in a blue state that your vote doesn't matter. Yes, California is a blue state for now, but there is a red wall here, and make no mistake, they turn out their voters in disproportionate numbers because they operate through churches and and get the entire church congregation to vote. So in a country where 40 to 50% of people don't bother to vote, and an additional number have their votes stolen from them through like race-based gerrymandering and other dirty tactics, you don't need majorities to win an election. All you need is a disproportionately motivated minority. So if we can, persuade people that their vote really does matter, and particularly like focus on, voting in every election and voting all the way down the ballot, we really might stand a chance. We have elections in less than 2 years. So the time to act is not right before the election. The time to act is now. We also, another thing I would say is we have to help people see that behind this religious front, right, there's a giant wave of money and corruption. So we need to focus some attention on the funders of the movement and on their political allies who are using religion as a shield for their larger aims. No part of reporting on or talking about these issues is particularly comfortable. I mean, when I was a young girl, my mom said to me, honey, if you want people to like you, don't talk about religion or politics. I just didn't go over. Maybe my life would have gone differently if I'd paid attention or at least adhered to what she was saying. But, when our democracy and our most fundamental rights are at stake, I frankly don't think we have a choice but to speak up. Thank you so much for the question, Jim.
Any other questions? Yeah, just raise your hand.
I see some, okay.
You used a expression in the early part of your book called reactionary nihilism. Can you elaborate on that?
Thank you so much for the question. I think of this movement as nihilistic because it's better defined by what it wants to destroy rather than what it wants to create. And they also seem to see no value in the world as it actually exists. They're always sort of saying, our world is so terrible, it just needs to be smashed up, right? So that's really nihilistic. And when they talk about what they want to create, it's always some sort of imaginary, like it's a sort of fantasy version of an imagined past that never existed the way they say it did and could never exist the way they think it can. So that's part of the nihilism. They're abandoning reality for fantasy. But what they want to create always also includes elements of a sort of reactionary political order, gender hierarchy, for some of them overtly racial hierarchy, or for some of them more implicitly racial hierarchy. Like, sometimes they're not really open about that, but and make sort of racial equality noises. But when you look at the policies that they're advocating and the way that they're targeting, people, they're really about the things that really animate them, and the idea that they really want to sort of bring back the license to discriminate. So it's always this sort of reactionary idea that they were going to go back to the 1950s, or sometimes they say the 1850s, right? When everybody supposedly knew their place in society, knew their place on the pecking order, and where all America supposedly had a single religion, which it didn't. So I put those words together to describe the movement as reactionary, a form of reactionary nihilism. Thank you.
Know your place, people. Jews and blacks, I'm talking to you.
So I'm reading your book right now.
Thank you.
And please don't take this literally. It's an expression. Just want to say you're doing God's work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Then after that, I have a confession. I'm only halfway through the book. I plan to read your 2 other books, and I've seen a lot of your interviews. So you talk about education, both at the higher education level, primary, secondary. You talk about the churches, religion, politics, big money. So my question to you, could you elaborate on the role of right-wing media, Fox, AON, I don't know how well Breitbart's doing these days, but Wall Street Journal, New York Post,
The Wall Street Journal is actually sort of standing up.
well,
believe it or not.
that's because of the financial aspect.
I know,
Okay.
it's sad that it's taken that. Like,
Yeah.
But hey, take the wins where we can get them. I'll tell you something about that right-wing sort of propaganda sphere or disinformation sphere. And it's not just Fox News or EWTN, which is Eternal Word Network Television, which is a kind of ultra-conservative Catholic. It's been called by some folks Fox News of Catholic television. There are also these like YouTube channels and Telegram stuff. There's a whole far-right disinformation sphere that is so far removed from the facts. You see a lot of that in action. I don't know if you've gotten to the Leaving Las Vegas chapter. It's really, oh, it's a good one. You're not supposed to choose. You're not supposed to choose favorites, but it's like I sort of, I love the sort of really deep investigative chapters because they're fun. And then of course there's the analysis stuff, which is also fun but harder going down. But you really get a taste of that when you go into those spaces and you see how. You ever talk to people, I don't know, maybe even in your own family or people that you know, and all of a sudden they're starting to talk about facts and you're like, where are you getting your information and how are you processing it? Well, it's because of the presence of this sort of far-right disinformation sphere. Propaganda works, people. I mean, think about Russia. It's like, we wouldn't really know the true numbers because political expression in Russia is so restricted, but large numbers of Russians think that they support the war because they were told that Ukrainians are Nazis, which is ridiculous. But, propaganda really works. It's sad.
I agree that organizing and getting together is really, really important, and finding your people. I think that's why all of us are here. But what really scares me, and that it seems to be the most insidious, is the purchase of the judiciary and the ignorance of whatever law, and how Donald Trump gets away with everything and anything, including rape and God knows what else. And so how do you begin to fight that if you can't? I mean, you can sue the pants off them, which people are doing, but the judges aren't standing up for us either.
On the Supreme Court, you're right. I mean, it's really a challenge. I wish there was an easy answer to that. Now, we have to know that I think how many lawsuits, a couple hundred lawsuits or more have already been launched related to various aspects of this extra constitutional or unconstitutional activity. Some of them are landing, so it's not the Supreme Court, but one of the things that these kinds of lawsuits can do is kind of slow roll it. So the hope.
When the judge said, turn the planes around, and he goes,
no, it's disgraceful. We're seeing we're in a real constitutional crisis. I mean, the time to act is now. So we do have elections in less than 2 years. I think, a year and a half or something? And the time to start acting is now. I want to just talk about something that I heard when I was at that America Fest. There was a lady who was talking about getting out the vote. She said, no, this is what the right does. They find trusted voices in their communities. And she said, when you don't approach people in September or August, if the vote is in November, approach them the previous year, like in March. She said, hold a barbecue and only invite Republicans. I'm telling you what she said. And don't talk about, voting. Just talk about, get to know them as people and create community, create a sense of, of connection, of human connection. And then when you reach back out, say in May or June, then you can start talking about issues and you're in conversation with someone who knows you and likes you. And then over time, you sort of ask them what they need to actually get to the polls. I mean, that kind of organizing is absolutely critical. I think for years, the right really went under the radar because it deals with, a lot of it is, because religious nationalism is so intrinsic to the anti-democratic movement. And how do you like intimidate most liberal people? You tell them they're intolerant, right? So we don't want to be seen as intolerant, and frankly, most of us want to, allow other people to have their faith, whatever. Just don't impose it on me, and don't try and fuse it into my laws, right? But the time to act is now, and the time to help people understand what's at stake is now.
But, a lot of the judges are appointed, so.
Well, there's no easy answers, but if we can sort of have political power, then other judges can be appointed. I mean, and the other thing is that other sort of measures can be taken to undo some of what has been done, but there are no guarantees. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, so it's not my job to sell hope as an investigative reporter. It's my job to report on the facts. Yet I think I have observed this movement over time enough to make a few recommendations, but no assurances, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to be contentious.
You're not. You're articulating what everybody is thinking. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. How much of this condition that we're living in right now, how much blame would you attribute to mainstream media? As a percentage-wise, just an estimate.
Thank you so much for the question. The media landscape is really diverse, and I think some aspects of mainstream media have done, if you look what's out there, I mean, I'm not sure what you count as mainstream, but like, think about investigative outlets like ProPublica, or think about, I don't know, Rolling Stone is actually doing, Vanity Fair is doing an amazing job, the New Republic, some of the New York Times reporting has been fantastic on the issue, some has been a little bit, it's a mixed bag, especially on their opinion pages. But there's been some great reporting out there. The problem is that this movement gets its people to separate from mainstream media. Look, listen, I've written for the New York Times, I've written for the Washington Post, I've written for a whole bunch of other Religion News Service, a whole bunch of other publications, and when you tell them that you write something is a lake, they're like, is it a lake or is it an estuary? Or is it maybe, a river? You know what I mean? Like, they really do fact-checking. So the fact-checking is there, like true media that does proper fact-checking exists. But when you're looking at sort of right-wing disinformation sphere, you're not looking at like proper fact-checking anymore. So I don't think the problem is really mainstream media. I think that some of the mainstream media has soft-pedaled the threat. And I do think that they deserve some blame for that, although I can't sort of say percentages. I think for a long time, some in the mainstream media tried to portray this as as just another normal development in the give and take of democratic politics, where they say, well, the right says this, the left says this. But it seems like people are really waking up now. So thank you so much for your question.
Our Vice President, J.D. Vance, seems to me to be a true Christian nationalist. But on the other hand, our President, Donald Trump, seems not to be. He seems to be using religion and Christian nationalism for his own gain and power and money. Do you agree with that analysis? And if not, why not?
Thank you so much for pointing that out. And it's sort of like I've seen him speak at a lot of like March for Life or Road to Majority Conference or Pray Vote Stand. I've seen him speak at a lot of sort of Christian nationalist gatherings, and he'll say things like, I gave you everything you wanted, and you know what? I think I gave you even more. And it shows that it's kind of transactional for him. Like, he didn't say, we got everything we wanted, and I think we're going to get even more, or we're getting even more. It was like, and why do they put their support behind him? Unprecedented political access. Policies that privilege their certain religious and political viewpoints. And I'm talking here about the movement leadership, not so much the rank and file as much, which is, I think you need to separate out the leadership and their agenda from the rank and file and their agenda. He gave them access to public money and increased their sources of private money. And he's allowing them to have a kind of, to get everything they want. Judges that favor their positions.
Let's do a few more questions.
Thanks for coming. I have childhood friends back in Iowa that have gone the Christian nationalist way. And I can't decide if I should try to, engage them and stay friendly or just not talk about these things at all if it comes up. Do you have any suggestions for that?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do they constantly bring it up? Do they constantly bring up politics?
Not overtly, but subtly.
They're
they
always
drop a
poking
hint once in a while.
They're poking a little
When
bit.
I was living in Iowa, they abducted me into an anti-abortion meeting that I didn't know I was going to.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, but they don't do that now. I think they see me as lost, so to speak. So I'm trying to decide what to do, with these treasured friends.
It's a hard one, isn't it? It's really challenging. I can't tell you what the right decision is for you. I always find it useful to maintain connections to people with different opinions because, and these issues, because it helps me understand. Like I always ask them, like, what media are you consuming? What are you watching? Or what YouTubers do you like? Or what podcasts do you listen to? I mean, as an investigative reporter, I find that information always very illuminating. But thanks for your question.
Yeah, my question is, well, first of all, a comment about the religious right and Trump. In Italy, Mussolini was a big atheist, but he used the Catholic Church as a tool to help him take over the country.
Exactly.
And anyway, my question is, talk about building coalitions, but how can this be done in a country that is a bi-party country with radical polarization, and it's difficult to talk to the other side because they're so far apart?
I'm not suggesting that you build coalitions with people who've gone down the sort of disinformation rabbit hole. What I'm talking about is that there are a lot of more Americans who really would prefer to live in a democracy, and those of us who are on the sort of, I would say, right-leaning, moderate, liberal left have to stop purity testing one another. We're not going to get agree on everything. It's like the narcissism of small differences. I might not agree with you on every single policy, but if we agree on more than we disagree on, then we can work together. If we agree in the principles of equality and pluralism and justice and an independent judiciary and strong public education and whatever, these kinds of things, then we can work together. We might not agree on some of the culture war stuff, but we need to be able to sort of look beyond that and look at the deeper issues.
So the Project 2025 people and the people you're writing about, are they the same people?
The Project 2025 is are they the same people as the Anti-Democratic Coalition? There's.
Who are the Project 2025 people in relationship to the people you're talking about?
Right, thank you so much. Well, Project 2025 was architected by some of the leaders of the New Right, which is a movement that I write about extensively in Money, Lies, and God. It includes people like Russ Vogt, who self-identifies as a Christian nationalist, and Kevin Roberts, who is an ultra-conservative Catholic. It includes chapters written by people who are, you basically see the influence of both the New Right and the religious right throughout Project 2025. It's kind of 900-page document with chapters written by different authors. I would say some of whom are more Christian nationalists than others. I think the New Right is less on balance, less explicitly Christian nationalist, but more explicitly anti-democratic. You know, it includes a lot of folks who says democracy doesn't work anymore. We need to abandon it and have a red Caesar, like a Republican, you know, dictator. So.
Okay, let's do two more questions.
My question is, if Trump keeps scaring everyone with his tariffs, do you think at some point a good number of his billionaire friends may decide to turn against him and start donating to Democrat Party?
One can only hope. Thank you so much.
Okay, last question. You still have your question?
My question was sort of along the same line. Do you think that when people go to the grocery stores in the immediate future, how can we get rid of Trump by that way? By just turning out in the streets or what?
I think, exactly. I mean, I really would love to see leaders that say, the price of milk is going up because of Donald Trump. The price of eggs is he told you he was going to reduce the price of groceries, and they're going up instead because of these stupid trade wars. He is making you poor. He is making our country weaker. He's making our country less secure. I mean, just that kind of very simple messaging on issues that like reach people where they are, I think is really important. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity there. No guarantees as to whether it will be exploited effectively or not, but the opportunity is absolutely there.
The book is called Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Thanks, Katherine. Appreciate all your work.